The NFL on Thursday settled on an 11-game suspension without pay and a $5 million fine for Cleveland Browns quarterback Deshaun Watson, who was accused by more than 24 women of sexual misconduct. The settlement reached between the league and the NFL Players Association amounts to a harsher punishment than the 6-game ban that was previously recommended, and also requires that Watson undergo mandatory counseling. An independent disciplinary officer found this month that Watson had violated league policy in, quote, various ways, and decided he should be suspended for 6 games but did not hand him a fine. The NFL appealed days later, and a source close to the situation told Reuters the league had initially sought a 1-year suspension. In a statement, NFL Commissioner Roger Goodell said, quote, Deshaun has committed to doing the hard work on himself that is necessary for his return to the NFL. In a statement posted to the Browns' Twitter page, Watson said he was, quote, grateful the disciplinary process was over, adding, quote, I apologize once again for any pain this situation has caused. Earlier this month, a former U.S. District Judge said Watson had violated the NFL's personal conduct policy after he was accused of sexual misconduct and abuse during massage sessions in lawsuits filed by 25 women, calling his behavior egregious and predatory. The NFL also said Watson's $5 million fine and additional contributions from both the league and the Browns will go toward a fund aimed at preventing sexual misconduct and assault in the United States. Watson's suspension takes effect on August 30th.
A U.S. judge on Thursday said he is leaning toward releasing some of the evidence presented by the Justice Department to justify its search of Donald Trump's Florida home last week in a case that pits news organizations against federal prosecutors. U.S. Magistrate Judge Bruce Reinhart ordered the DOJ, despite the agency's objections, to file a redacted version of the affidavit. The DOJ had argued that releasing the affidavit, even in redacted form, could harm the ongoing probe, which they described as still being in the early stages and involving highly sensitive grand jury material. But news outlets, including the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal, and ABC News, tried to persuade the judge of the public's right to know, arguing the historic significance of the search outweighs any argument to keep the record sealed. Attorney Deanna Schulman represents Dow Jones & Company, publisher of the Wall Street Journal.
I feel good about today's hearing. Judge Reinhart seems to have a very good sense that it is his job as the gatekeeper in this case to perform his function of balancing the interest in the public of accessing these materials against the interest in the government in keeping them secret.
The search of Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort, which was approved by Reinhart on August 5th, is part of a federal investigation into whether Trump illegally removed documents when he left office in January of 2021 after losing the presidential election to Joe Biden. Trump, who has repeatedly claimed the Mar-a-Lago search was politically motivated, has made statements on social media calling on the court to unseal the unredacted version, but his attorneys have not filed any such requests. The DOJ also voiced growing safety concerns. Threats directed at FBI agents have increased since the raid. Police shot dead an armed man in Ohio last week after he tried to breach an FBI building, and a man in Pennsylvania was charged with making threats against FBI agents. Trump's rhetoric against the FBI has caught on with GOP voters. A Reuters Ipsos poll this week found that 54% of Republicans say federal law enforcement officials behaved irresponsibly in the case.
Here in the United States, there have been over 13,500 cases of monkeypox identified across 49 states, as well as Washington, D.C. and Puerto Rico.
CDC Director Rochelle Walensky on Thursday announced a big jump in the number of monkeypox cases nationwide, which represents more than a third of global cases. The new tally comes as the U.S. scrambles to contain the virus.
The median age of cases is 35, and among cases with known recent sexual history and gender, 93% of cases were among men who reported recent sexual contact with other men.
To respond to the growing outbreak, the Department of Health and Human Services announced Thursday it is boosting its vaccine supply by making the equivalent of an additional 1.8 million doses available in the coming days.
From what we know right now, we expect protection to be the highest 2 weeks after the second dose of the vaccine.
The virtual news conference, a look reminiscent of the early days of the COVID-19 pandemic,
Chris, you might be having some challenges, so
came a day after the CDC said the agency was undertaking a series of changes designed to make it more nimble at responding to public health emergencies. The CDC on Wednesday said an external report into its COVID-19 and monkeypox response found that public guidance had caused confusion.
You no longer need to isolate. However,
while important information was sometimes released too late to inform federal decisions. According to a background briefing document shared with Reuters, plans to modernize the agency include giving the CDC new authority to require states to report data, and changes that will allow the CDC to hire more staff more quickly and offer more competitive salaries. Both actions will require authorization from Congress.
As Europe's largest nuclear power plant becomes the center of escalating tensions between Russia and Ukraine, prompting fears of catastrophe, UN Secretary General Antonio Guterres on Thursday called for its urgent demilitarization.
And we must tell it as it is. Any potential damage to Zaporizhzhia is suicide.
It comes as Guterres met with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky and Turkish President Tayyip Erdogan for talks in Lviv. The situation at the Zaporizhzhia plant was top of the agenda. Both sides also say the other is planning a provocation at the facility on Friday. It was captured by Russian forces soon after the invasion of Ukraine, and the two countries have accused each other of shelling the plant. Russia has said it could shut down the facility, a move Kyiv warns would increase the risk of a nuclear catastrophe. Shutting down a nuclear power plant is a complicated operation that requires halting nuclear chain reactions while protecting fuel from heating up and causing a meltdown. Zelensky has accused Russia of nuclear blackmail.
On nuclear security, this is most definitely the priority of the whole world. New challenges. Russia should immediately, without any preconditions, withdraw its troops from the Zaporizhzhia nuclear power plant.
Moscow has rejected the idea of demilitarizing the plant. Reuters cannot independently confirm the military situation there or the responsibility for shelling of the plant. The war has killed thousands and forced millions to flee after Moscow launched what it calls a special military operation in February.